this is a very pertinent topic because, I don't know, I have a 4 and a 3/4-year-old, don't forget the 3/4, and it's a real struggle. What should we be doing?
Look, Kat, it is a struggle, and I think it can be frustrating for parents. And I think what I wanted to do today was to start with sort of like the basics of toilet training. So at 4 3/4, you might be 2 3/4 years into it. So I hope that you can see some ways that you might be able to modify what's going on. But it does matter, because if you start prompting all the time, then you might lead them to have some issues with a small capacity bladder as they get to be an older child and then an adolescent and then an adult. So we know there's a link between having issues as a child and having problems of an overactive bladder, for example, or constipation as an adult. But one of the things I wanted to say is just starting with toilet training. There's a bit of a trend that I'm seeing now where some people are starting to try and do things like even with little babies, and that they're sort of trying to do some cueing, making little whistling noises, holding them over potties and catching it. And I think that what the evidence tells us is that it is important not to start too early. And I usually say to parents, not generally before they're 2, but just like some kids are very advanced with other milestones, they might be expressing lots of interest in starting earlier, and that's fine. But as long as you don't become too dogmatic about it and start causing issues. So, just like you've got differences in children too. I think I find mums often anxious because kids at playgroup are doing better than their child or their siblings, and the ones that they did the first time were easier than the second time. So it's really important just to treat every child as an individual.
Yeah, salient advice. Let's stay with the younger years before we move into sort of later kindy and starting school, Sue. But as you say, if you're sort of saying about 2 years old, and again, highly individualised and so on, is when you consider the toilet training. So what does that look like, nappies until that point?
Look, I think it is important to have nappies until that point, because otherwise, if you start with undies too early, and that might come from even grandparents as sort of dictating what they did and think should happen, you really just all the time you're cleaning up messes, and that can lead to exasperated parents, and then that's not a very happy scenario. So I think it's important to start, once you start, make that thing, and I think it's always better to do it in spring or summer. Trying to toilet train a child in winter is crazy because there's too many clothes and it's too cold, and so just start. Now's a good time to start. So spring is a great time. We have lovely warm days here, and I think making a little bit of a thing about it. Let's go and buy a potty and go to the shops and do that and let them help choose. Let's get some undies. They might have some Spider-Man on them for boys and whatever you want for girls, and let's not be, I suppose I shouldn't say that, but gender specific. Just get some undies. Yes. And make it a bit of a thing that there's a bit of excitement about it.
Okay.
Also, I think using simple language like wheeze, poos, and potty, and don't complicate it with a whole lot of instructions. Just say, do you need to do a wee? Do you need to do a poo? But also, I think demonstrating, I think it's really important, even though we might love our privacy, that if you can teach them that it's quite normal to go to the toilet and do a wee, and I teach people how to sit properly for wees and poos, and that's why a potty is so good, because it naturally puts little children into a nice posture.
Okay.
If you pop them up on the toilet too soon without foot support, then their legs dangle and they start to slump back, and then some really bad posture starts and some really bad patterning with their abdominal muscles. So a potty is a great way to start. One of the other things is that, if you are not getting anywhere, recognise that they might be too young to start and not quite ready, and it's okay just to stop, have a few weeks or a month break. And remember that in a young child, a month is like 6 months in a 5-year-old. Their developmental improvements are really rapid through that age. So it's okay just to put it off and wait a little bit longer, and never try and do it when you've got to also move house, or if the child is sick or you're sick, or, maybe something unfortunate's happened. You've lost a pet or worse, a grandparent. So try and make sure that everything is really sort of conducive to for it being successful.
Sue Croft is with you, pelvic health physiotherapist. This is your top tip for feeling a little bit better today, and it might be just feeling a bit better about the bladder habits of the little one in your life. And of course, Sue's advice is general in nature. If you would like to seek out specialist care and attention, you're welcome and encouraged to do so. Sue, let's talk about the slightly older children. We're reaching the end of the year. School might be on the agenda for some families. There's a real push to make sure that your child knows how to use a toilet by the time they start school. If you feel you're behind the eight ball there, where do you go in the next few months?
Well, look, I do think toileting is one of those things that should definitely be in a really good situation before you send them to school, because having fecal incontinence episodes in prep is really difficult for the child, and it's not so pleasant for the staff either. So I think if you're at this stage of the year and you've got a 4.5 or 5-year-old who is having incontinent episodes of either bladder or bowel, then you definitely need to contact a pelvic health physiotherapist who works in that area with pediatrics. And children are not little adults, so they do need to have specific different ways of approaching it. So it's not just a general pelvic health. They've got to be able to do pediatrics as well. So teaching them about what is a poo message, that, I demonstrate and I say, the poos knock at the back door, and I say that, a poo message is a fart or a fluff, and joke about what do you call it in your family. Are we allowed to say fart on the ABC?
Go for it. Yeah.
We just did. And also, get grumbly tummy. So, it's funny, kids just, if they're very constipated, and constipation is the primary cause of any fecal incontinence, they just have a very enlarged rectum and colon, and so they don't actually feel that message very well. So they're not getting the message like we might get it. And that's come over months and months and months of slow burning constipation that is not being picked up by the parent.
Okay.
Once the child is out of nappies, parents lose contact with what's going on with their bowels. So because they're not cleaning things up, they don't really know how big or small. If they go in to do a little bowel motion, but it's only an inch they push out, but the parent might think they're going daily, but it's not really. They're actually quite backed up. So making sure that you deal with the constipation can often help a bladder problem.
So before I let you go, and obviously there's so much to talk through with this topic, and I'm sure we'll revisit it in some way, shape or form again in the future, but you did make mention of something that you have spoken about before in relation to adults' toilet habits, and this is the idea of a small capacity bladder. And in some situations, maybe a mum who's had a traumatic birth and a sustained injury and has developed an incontinence and goes to the toilet frequently might be encouraging her little one to go to the toilet at the same time. Makes sense. It's easy.
Yes.
Often easier that way. But that mightn't be the best thing to do for your child in the interests of avoiding small capacity bladders. Can you expand on that, please, this afternoon?
Look, I think it's letting the child understand when they need to go and that they have a full message and a full bladder, rather than saying, we're at Indro, I need to go, darling, you come in and go too. It's a nuisance to go back again maybe half an hour or 3/4 an hour later, but it's teaching the child what is their full bladder and not teaching them to go a lot just in case. And I think also I often see kids here and mums realise they've got more of an issue than they realise. So it's really important to recognise that the bladder's job is to store urine, and that each age group, whether you're a little child or you're a big grown-up, has a normal capacity, and that's what we go through and work out what's the age of the child, what should they be storing, and any adult should be capable of holding 350 to 500 mils. And just because you've had not just because, but having a traumatic birth and having bladder issues, it is important to try and address that earlier, because it actually deteriorates with aging, with going through menopause for women. So getting in earlier and getting some early treatment makes a huge difference.
All right. Very important message as ever. Sue Croft, again, thank you very much.